this is the Folksy Friend, and on this channel I talk about stories. In particular, folktales, beliefs, and mythologies. On Tuesdays, we talk about Tolkien. And even though this isn't Tuesday, we are still going to talk about Tolkien, because this is a mostly quick overview of the long journey of the elves. For a more in-depth breakdown of that journey, please take a look at my other video up here. The elves in Middle-earth have awoken beside a bay, and after years of torment by Melkor, they were finally saved by the Valar, who waged a war to keep them safe. A war that Melkor lost and saw him dragged to prison for. With the elves out of immediate danger, but still in not a super safe environment, the Valar decide to bring them across Middle-earth into Valinor, a very long and difficult journey. The elves were wary because they really didn't know the Valar. They saw them as these terrifying creatures who had waged this great war, and their history with Melkor made them mistrustful. So 3 elves were chosen to be emissaries, to go to Valinor and kind of scope out the situation and report back to the other elves. The 3 that were chosen were Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. The emissaries were amazed by Valinor and the Valar, so when they returned to the other elves, they tried to convince as many as possible to band together and travel to Valinor. Many of the elves decided to make the journey, but some did not. Brace yourself for a lot of names. I will keep track of it on the screen, but it's Tolkien. The elves who chose to stay in Middle-earth became the Mori Quendi, or Elves of Darkness, because they never went to see the light of the trees. The elves who chose to journey to Valinor became the Calaquendi, or Elves of Light. However, they used the name Eldar because that was the name that the Valar gave them. The Eldar split into 3 groups, each one led by one of the 3 emissaries who became their kings. Ingwe led the Vanyar, the smallest group. Finwë led the Noldor, arguably the most important group in Middle-earth history. And Elwë led the Teleri, the largest group who had the toughest time on the road. Then the elves, led by Arome on his noble steed, began the long journey to Valinor. After many, many years of travel, the group stops at the wide river Anduin, and they were intimidated by the Towers of Mist, a jagged mountain range, also known as the Misty Mountains. Arome helped the Vanyar and the Noldor safely cross the river and go up into the mountain passes. But the Teleri, who were in the back of the group, finally come up to cross, and with Arome gone ahead into the mountains, they look up at those jagged peaks and become afraid, and they stop. At this point, one of the Teleri elves, Lenwë, broke off and led a small group down the river. These elves became the Nandor. Now we have a subgroup of the Mori Quendi called the Umanyar, those who wanted to go to Valinor but never quite made it. Back with the main group, the Vanyar and Noldor make it through the Blue Mountains and into Beleriand, which is the western part of Middle-earth. Arome leads them to the coast, but quickly realizes that he has no safe way to get the elves across the sea and to Valinor. The only option he has is the Helcaraxe, which is a very, very dangerous stretch of essentially icebergs in the far north. So Arome goes to speak with the Valar to figure out how to get the elves across. Eventually, the Teleri make it over the mountains, led on by their king, who does not want to be left behind by the Noldor, because he is close friends with their king. They stop at the river Gelion to rest. During this time, their king, Elwë, while walking in the woods, meets Melian, a beautiful Maiar, and the 2 become frozen in a trance. The Valar finally send Ulmo over to Middle-earth to bring the elves across, and he brings the Vanyar and the Noldor across on an island that he essentially uses as a ship. However, when he does this, the Teleri are still in kind of the eastern part of Beleriand, looking for their king, who they still can't find, and they miss the summons and they miss the ship. Upon realizing they've been left behind, Elwë's brother, Olwë, because everybody's away, becomes the king of the Teleri, and he leads them down to the mouths of the river Sirion in hopes that someday Ulmo will come back for them. Some of the Teleri, however, refused to stop searching for Elwë, and they became the Eglath, or the Forsaken. The Teleri beside the sea became friends with Ose and Uinen, which became a problem when, after years of pleading by the elves in Valinor, Ulmo finally returned. Oisé did not want to lose his friends, so he convinced some of the Teleri to stay. This group became the Falathrim. The rest of the Teleri board the island ship, and Ulmo begins to push it across the sea. When their island becomes close enough to see the light of Valinor, Oisé calls out for them, and the elves beg Ulmo to stop. He rooted the island to the sea floor, and it became Tol Erisi, the Lonely Isle. They were within sight of Valinor, but still in their beloved sea, and beneath the stars. Thus ends the great journey of the elves. I hope you'll join me next week when I go over what happens next, how everyone settles into their new environments, and how they interact with the world around them. If you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next week. To make the journey, but some of them did not.